Hey, 2 weeks from the day, Adam Sandler is back in Omaha. You're My Best Friend tour at the Chai. Listen to John and Josh in the afternoons all week long. You can win your way into the show. More details at 1620thezone.com. We welcome in Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. Good Tuesday morning, Sam.
Hello. How are you guys today?
Good. Let's talk some defense here, because yesterday was kind of wild of Deshaun Singleton. Not wild that he won Defensive Player of the Week in the Big Ten, but it's the first time that somebody on Nebraska's defense has won it in 4 years.
Oh, my God.
JoJo Domann was the last to do it, and he was actually, I think he was a co-guy that year after the Northwestern win. But as we reach the midway point, and you might do this, because I know national people that cover the Big Ten probably will, their mid-season all Big Ten team.
Yeah.
Is there more than one that could be on a mid-season all Big Ten team? Because I'm kind of including Singleton.
Yeah, that's possible. I think you've got to decide who you want to put on there. I think if you were to ask the coaches, Sierra Wright might be the guy that gets right there at the top because of his willingness to go to slot corner and the kind of play that he's had. Singleton's up there, obviously. He would be an interesting guy too, to potentially have in that spot. It's entirely possible. It's tough because there's so many teams in the league that you almost feel like 11 players is insufficient to identify like all of the good players in the league. And so, you can start thinking about it mentally, and you're going to run into 11 players awfully fast. And so hopefully anybody that's doing that list is actually doing like 18 players or something like that, or 22, because that's probably what it belongs to. Back in the day, being all Big 8 meant you were one of the best players on 8 teams. And now all Big 10, you're one of the best players on 18. That's quite an expansion.
Sam, you're an AP poll voter, and we've talked about your poll before, and I've told this, Gary, on and off the air, that I actually can tell that you watch these football games on the way that you vote, because you just don't go with the flow. Like, there are obviously some results and how teams look that affect your vote. And looking at your poll, I want to ask you this question: why do we do some things for some people that we don't do for others? Because we look at Notre Dame, and a lot of AP poll voters look at Notre Dame and say, whoa, they only lost by, 4 points against 2 top teams in the country. We're going to put them at number 16. But we don't give the same respect to a team like Auburn, who was only down 3 points in the fourth quarter against a team like Texas A&M and like Oklahoma. Why do we treat Notre Dame so well, but we don't give it back to Auburn, who's done a similar thing?
Probably because of things that Notre Dame did last year, and because Notre Dame's offense is more explosive, and who the names are. And, I think people will pay a little bit more attention to offense. Auburn had 2 very difficult losses in a row, both on the road, both the teams that are ranked in the top 10. Notre Dame lost one of those games at home. They have a common opponent, and they have very similar resumes. I do have Notre Dame ahead of Auburn, but not by much. And I'm the only one who has Auburn ranked. And believe me, that earned me some guff this week, because they weren't ranked last week and they had a bye week, and people don't always understand that, like, it's not a moral event. I'm not trying to elevate teams based on, emotions. I just go based on what my list was the week before, and I kind of look at the data, and I try to move things around based on what I think everyone is relative to everything else. And the other thing is, I could be wrong. Auburn's going to host Georgia this week, and we'll see what happens. Maybe Auburn will win the game, and it'll look like I know what I'm talking about, or they'll lose by 30, and it'll look like I don't. I can say that after the first week of the poll, so in the second week, I had Virginia ranked, and I had Virginia ranked based on what it did to Coastal Carolina. And they beat Coastal Carolina, I think, 48-7. And I was the only person who had Virginia ranked. And look where Virginia is now. So I base my rankings based on performance and what I think I see and things that I think I know. And so that's kind of where all that ends up. Nebraska is very close to the top 25, but they're not quite in.
Would they be in if they won on Saturday?
I don't know. It's relative to
what other people
everything that happens around them. So, like, I would not, for example, have predicted that Penn State would have lost on Saturday. I thought Texas might have lost, but they would have lost in a way that was more impressive than what they did. So, like, so much of what happens is relative to everything else. And the other thing is, like, one of the reasons that Penn State's not in my top 25 is because their wins are over Florida International, Villanova, and Nevada. And a couple of those games, they really weren't that good.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, like, at the end of the day, I compare their resume to the resume of Auburn, which only has one power conference win, but it's on the road at Baylor, and Baylor's good.
Mm-hmm.
Baylor has had a very hard schedule this year up to this point. And so, I kind of base it on those things. Baylor is one of the few teams to play two power conference teams in its non-conference schedule. So, there's just things that linger, and that's the way it is. And we'll see what happens this week.
Hey, he kind of joked yesterday about the negative and positive, but we're on about 2 weeks where Rule seems to be really short. Is there something bothering him about how his team is perceived, either inside the borders or outside?
Honestly, I don't think so, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I think there's a sense of bothered, maybe. I don't know. Like, I think he's trying to defend his team, and I think he wants his young team to be confident and to believe in itself and all the rest. I think there was a little bit of loosening up yesterday, especially as we kind of talked a little bit about travel and some other things. And so, like, I think there was some of that. I think last week, obviously, you're coming off. I thought he was very good after the Michigan loss the Monday after. And then the following week, we didn't have that many questions because what are we coming off of? A bye week. They're playing Michigan State. And now, you go and you talk about a little bit about Maryland, a team that nobody knows that much about. And you just kind of go from there. So I don't know. Like, I think that his, the offensive line and the offensive line coach has probably gotten quite a bit of guff, and I'm sure he's heard about that secondhand. And there's only so many things that you can do there to work through that. And the quarterbacks made his share of plays, and also there's he's young and he's still working on stuff. So, like, I think there's a little bit of a sensitivity there, but I don't think there's much sensitivity there. And I think ultimately, Nebraska's defense did rebound against Michigan State, and I think he was just trying to have sort of a lighthearted moment there when he's like, you can talk about positive stuff, which is true. You can.
Well, I think it's the balance. You and I, and most of us have been around here for a long time, so there's a lot more negative than positive in the last 15 years.
Sure.
But I think there was something really positive out of Saturday, but you kind of, one hand says they won a football game that they don't normally win, and maybe the last 10 to 15 years, Nebraska football doesn't win it. And then the other hand is like, well, look how they looked, and there was that 42-minute stretch. Yeah. So I think he's kind of caught in the middle of, I just arrived and I'm in my third year, and I'm trying to change the mindset of how we look at progress. That's how sometimes when I hear him talk and answer questions, that's how sometimes I see him.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's true. I would also say, though, that, from the time that offseason began until, kickoff against Michigan, the positivity was unmitigated and pretty close to 100%. So you take a little bit of the good with the bad.
Yes.
Like, there was an unusual amount. And again, like, I remember, the pre-Cincinnati press conference, and everybody's still talking about, with the exception of me, talking about, podcasts and stuff that happened 3 months ago. And, like, everybody was still in off-season mode. And then they almost lose to Cincinnati, and everybody's like, whoa, what happened? We thought they were going to win by 30. Like, that's just kind of how that goes a little bit. And then you get into the season, and then, again, Rule has been very consistent about this, that the Big Ten is hard.
Yeah.
And I still feel like there's a lot of people that are like, it's still the Big Ten. And it's not. It's a much, 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 much better league than the Big 12. And it's a much, much, much better league than the ACC. So, for example, BYU is 5-0. I don't have them ranked. Other people do. They've beaten Stanford, Colorado, and I can't remember, West Virginia. Nebraska would beat all of those teams by a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just like there's such a gap between the leagues, and that's hard for people to put their arms around. And so I think that's probably something he's reacting to. He looks at the Big Ten like the NFL. Like, the Buffalo Bills might be the best team in the NFL, and they just lost to the Patriots at home. But you don't look at it and go, oh, my God, they lost to the Patriots. The season's over. I think that's how you need to look at the Big Ten relative to the teams in it.
Looking at Nebraska's metrics here, they're throwing the ball 55% of the time. That's 22nd in the country. And you're looking at Maryland's defense. They rank 16th in EPA per pass, which is expected points added. And their rush defense is pretty good too. Their EPA is 10th in the country. In your opinion, does Nebraska need to have a balance to try and cut through one of these formidable defenses, whether it be through the pass or the rush, or do you think they just have to lean on their strengths and hope that they can find advantage in the passing game?
I think they would tell you that they're going to look at what the defense is going to do, and they're going to adjust accordingly. And so one of the things that I think, Michigan State was going to make it hard, unless Nebraska wanted to put Harburg and Lindenmeyer out there over and over and just run the ball down their throat. Like that, Michigan State's defense wasn't going to make that easy. And so you have to kind of pick your spots a little bit there. And, they busted runs late in the game. I mean, they got the runs when they needed them in the late third quarter and the fourth. So I think, you're going to see Nebraska try to look at what Maryland wants to do. That they could come out and do what Michigan State did and be in man coverage and pressure Dillon. And at that point, you got to throw the ball. You got to make some plays, especially short screens, things like that. Or they could sit back in coverage and let Nebraska control the ball. And that's something that, like, I think Nebraska knows how to do that. They did it against Cincinnati. They did it against Boston College. They did it last year against Iowa. They lost the game somehow, but they controlled the game. And I think that's what a team like Maryland wants to avoid. I think they want to try to get Nebraska off the field and put Nebraska's defense on the field, but hard to say. Like you got to go into every game and think about how do you want to win the game, and then what pieces do you have available, and how do you go about that. And Nebraska, I'm sure, has a vision in its mind, and Maryland has a vision in its mind.
Yeah.
I think Nebraska needs to run the ball more, and I think they need to be able to just say, you know what, we're just going to run the ball here. We are going to expose our will. It's Maryland, okay? Not Ohio State. We're going to run the ball downhill. They got to be able to do that, and that's what I would do, but I don't know that that's what they're going to do. And Daniel Holgorsen did a really nice job in that game of adjusting his offense and getting those short screens going. And those are like run plays. Yeah. They don't call them run plays. But the most violent block in the entire game was Justin Evans on that screen pass. Now, you don't call it a run play because it's a 1-yard pass, but the reality is it's a run play. And if that's the way Daniel Holgorsen wants to call run plays, and it gains 59 yards and a touchdown, then so be it.
All right. Can they run the ball when they want to? I agree with what you just said about running the ball and the ideology behind it, but your personal opinion, do you think they can run the ball when they want to run the ball?
I think the jury's still a little bit out on that, and I think we're going to learn a lot more in the next 3 weeks. They're going to face good defenses in the next 3 weeks. I mean, Maryland is a good defense,
good run defense,
and and Minnesota will be ready. I'm just telling you, they will be ready, and that will not be a walkover game for Nebraska. And then Northwestern, that's what they do. I mean, they play really hard and they play really tough. They don't have a lot of players. And so that's a game where I do feel like Nebraska needs to like win on the edge and, throw the ball for 300 yards and beat Northwestern. But Northwestern will fight you in the box. They will battle you in there. So I think we'll learn a lot in the next 3 weeks. I'm not expecting, whatever you want to call it, like fireworks. I think if you get to 130 to 150 and that's where you want to be. Like that's where this team's going to be. They're probably not a 200-yard a game offense. They're probably, they'd ideally like to be in that 150 range. And if they can get there, then I think they're doing what they want to do.
Gary and I in the offseason had a conversation about what will Mike Eckler's wins above replacement be for the season. And I said it'd be about 1.5. that him being on the staff, they'll just win one more game and get a big edge in another one that maybe they haven't had before. Through 5 games, Sam, do you think he's already surpassed that?
He's probably right at it. Yep. So I think the special teams was a huge reason why Nebraska won on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can probably add up the other little edges along the way and get really close to that 0.5. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's done a really good job. And he connects with the players, as Rule said. He's got good schemes. They've been able to figure out some things. And the other thing is Rule wants to be aggressive in special teams. Mm-hmm. Not every head coach wants that, but he does. And what I would say is that he's found a coordinator who really matches up with that. Like the things that Eckler wants to be about, yielding punts, making plays, changing the game with special teams is exactly what Rule wants to do. And so when you put those two things together, I think you get a really good fit. And I think it's gone incredibly well to this point. And I think it was a really good hire by Rule in the offseason.
Yeah, great hire. Sam, as always, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's a good conversation, my friend.
Take care.